Hello everyone and welcome to another really awesome game from round 9 of the second day of the World Rapid Championship. It's Boris Gelfand versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov. It's quite a game, let's check it out and then we're gonna discuss on what happens next. So Boris with the white pieces opens with d4. We have knight to f6 by Abdusattorov, knight to f3, d5 and now c4. We have e6, so Queen's Gambit declined is on the board, and now g3. Boris opts for the Catalan opening, d captures on c4 and now bishop to g2. We have knight to c6 and queen to a4 now, pinning this knight, and bishop to b4 check. This is the absolute main line, and both of them are very familiar with it as it would seem. So knight bishop d2 blocking check, and now knight to d5 defending the bishop as it's attacked twice. So bishop captures on b4, knight captures, and now knight to c3. And this is a well-known position where usually players just continue bishop to d7 so you can move this knight, and the game goes on. But here we have rook to b8. It's a very sneaky idea by young Nodirbek here, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what the plan is. Obviously you want to execute b5 at some point, but how will that happen? So here we have a3, Boris chases away the knight, knight to d5, and now queen captures on c4. For the moment b5 is impossible because the knight would hang. So here Boris Nodirbek just castles. We have rook to d1. And now comes knight to a5, attacking the queen here, queen to d3, and only now we have b5. And now you are preparing to bring this knight to c4, but what about the b5 pawn? Can the b5 pawn be captured? Well, the problem is if you capture this, of course, the bishop to a6 is incredibly unpleasant, and even if you play a4 to stop prevent the loss of a piece, c6, and that's it. White can resign. So of course white cannot capture this pawn. We have castles by Gelfand, and now knight to c4, going for that b2 pawn. So Gelfand has to retreat with the queen, queen to c2, and now knight captures on c3, queen captures on c3. He doesn't want to play b captures, then the a3 pawn becomes weak, so queen captures, and now bishop to b7, ready to counter Boris's strong light square bishop on g2. We have knight to d2, offering to trade off everything, and here comes the bishop captures on g2, king captures, and a wonderful centralizing move with queen to d5 with check, king to g1, and now rook f to d8, putting pressure on the d4 pawn, so this prevents white from executing e4 right away. So knight captures on c4, we have b captures on c4, for the moment doubling black's pawns, but it's not a problem. Boris plays rook to d2, prepares to bring the rook to d1, also adds additional support to the b2 pawn, but now rook to b3. And you can see how all of black's play is pretty much based on this rook to b8 followed by b5 idea. The pawn is now nicely placed on c4, and the rook has a beautiful outpost on b3. So queen back to c2, and now another wonderful move, c3. Completely undermining white's position, getting rid of your doubled pawn, but this will make this pawn weak, and well, black will just collect the pawn. So b captures on c3, and now queen to c4, attacking this pawn, and you can also capture this pawn. So queen d3, and now queen captures on c3. We have rook f to d1, and here rook captures on a3, and after all is said and done, Nodirbek is up a pawn. So here we have queen captures on c3, rook captures on c3, and now Boris goes after the a7 pawn with rook to a1. So black is up a pawn, but it's rook endgame. Both pairs of rooks are on the board, so it's not going to be easy to convert this pawn. Instead of this, also d5 is an idea, but I guess Boris still wants to keep some chances alive. c5, of course, the pawn is captured. You cannot move it, otherwise the rook falls here. So rook captures on a7, and now you could go after this pawn with c captures on d4, but well, for example, c captures on d4, rook captures. You can't capture with the rook because of the back rank checkmate. So Abdusattorov first makes some breathing room for the king, g6 is played, and now we have rook to c7, attacking, putting pressure on the pawn, but just rook captures on d4. And now if you capture, it's possible to capture, but then pawn captures and the black has no problems here. So Boris goes back, rook to a2, and now we have rook to d5, adding more support to the pawn. And now you can move the c3 rook. So rook to a8 check, king to g7. And now what can white play here? Well, there are a lot of moves white can play that lead to a draw. For example, just rook to a7 going after the f7 pawn is enough for white to claim a draw. Other moves are possible as well. For example, rook to a6, threatening rook captures on e6. So many moves here, but Boris plays pretty much the only move that loses the game. He plays pawn to e4, attacks the rook, and even though it looks like you shouldn't be losing the game, that's exactly what you've done. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Abdusattorov while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not going rook to d1 check, even though, you know, it's always hard to resist giving a check, I know. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent avoider of useless checks. Rook to d2 is the move. And now there is no defense against rook to c2 and just gobbling up all of the pawns and, well, and or checkmating the white king. Boris tries rook to a1. He wants to play rook to f1 to defend his f2 pawn, but it doesn't matter. Rook to c2 goes after the pawn. We have to defend it. Rook to f1, and now just rook to e2, and he was in this position on move 34 that Boris Gelfand resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You're already down a pawn, and now you're losing this pawn, and then you'll be down 2 pawns, and being down 2 pawns means a completely winning endgame for black. Problem is, you cannot play f3 because you're getting checkmated. Rook g2 check, king h1, rook captures, king g1, and now the other rook delivers checkmate. So that's why you cannot defend the pawn, unfortunately for Gelfand. So yeah, after this unfortunate rook to e2, he resigned, and that's a third win in a row for young Abdusattorov, which means he is now on 7 points. He is sharing second place with Grishuk and Nepo, and he will be facing none other than Magnus Carlsen in the next round. Here you can see how his tournament went so far. So first a victory against Mikhalevsky, then a victory against Dudin, then a victory against Caruana, then two draws, one against Nepo, one against Alexander Grishuk, then a loss to Anton Korobov, the always unpleasant Korobov, you know, just grabbing as many scalps as he can, then a win against Arunyan, then a win against Wojtaszek, and then a win against Boris Gelfand. So he's having an amazing tournament, but it's Magnus who he will be facing next. He has the white pieces against Magnus, so we'll see. We'll see how he does. This will not be their first encounter. If you remember, they also had a very interesting game in the 2019 World Blitz Championship. I made a video on that game. It was completely crazy. I think Abdusattorov was winning at some point. But if you guys have some extra time and want to check it out, it's a very short video. It will be the first thing you see in the description below. So also enjoy that. Maybe as a preparation, as probably, unless it's a complete snooze fest, we will be covering Abdusattorov versus Magnus in the next video. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Checkmate Epilepsy, Catherine Maltarich, Jack Schroeder, Jeffrey Radanor, and David Kimura for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this magnificent event until it ends. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.